March 4th, 2006, World of Warcraft. A player named Fei-Jin had passed away in real life from a stroke. She was only in her 20s. Her guild decided to hold an in-game funeral in her honor at a place called Winter Spring. They announced it in the forums. Players from across the server showed up to pay their respects. Everyone was unarmed, out of combat mode, gathered peacefully. And then, from over the hills, a rival guild came in charging, fully geared, fully buffed, screaming battle cries. They absolutely massacred everyone at the funeral, killed every single mourner, while recording it, then posted the video online with Evanescence playing in the background. The internet lost its mind. Death threats were sent. The attacking guild received so much hate that some of the members quit the game. It became one of the most controversial moments in MMO history. And you know what? It was also one of the most talked about, well-planned griefing tactics ever executed. Hey, welcome back to MMO Madness Behind the Troll Mask. I'm Boss Mode. And today we're diving into the creative side of griefing, not the brainless stuff like spawn camping or ninja looting. I'm talking about elaborate, ingenious, sometimes brilliant tactics that made you think, I can't believe someone thought of that. We're going to explore the fine line between impressive creativity and genuine harm, because sometimes trolling is so well executed that you have to respect the craft, even if you hate the outcome. Before we get into the stories, let's talk about what separates creative griefing from regular trolling. Regular griefing is lazy. It's spawn camping someone over and over. It's stealing loot and logging off. It's saying slurs in chat. Anyone can do that. It takes a zero skill, zero creativity, and zero intelligence. It's just being an asshole because you can be. Creative griefing, that's different. That requires understanding game mechanics at a deep level. It requires planning, sometimes coordination with other players. It requires identifying an exploit or loophole that the developers never considered. And most importantly, it requires execution. You have to actually pull it off. Let me give you an example of the difference. In World of Warcraft, regular griefing would be camping someone's corpse in a PvP zone. Creative griefing. That's using mind control to make enemy players jump off cliffs to their death while they're in the middle of an important quest. Regular griefing is stealing someone's mining code. Creative griefing is using a levitation glitch to reach ore deposits that aren't supposed to be accessible, then crashing the server economy by flooding it with rare materials. Creative griefing usually has a few key characteristics. First, it's unexpected. No one saw it coming because it uses mechanics in ways that weren't intended. Second, it's hard to counter. By the time you realize what's happening, it's too late. Third, it usually takes advantage of developer oversights. There's always this moment where you think, how did the devs not see this coming? And fourth, it often generates a story that outlives the grief itself. The best griefing makes people laugh even if they're mad. You're sitting there thinking, that's terrible, but also, that's kind of genius. It's the difference between vandalism and street art. Both are technically defacing property, but one of them at least took talent. Now, I want to be really clear about something. Just because griefing is creative doesn't make it okay. Some of the tactics we're going to talk about today cross serious lines. They hurt real people, cost real money, and destroyed communities. The creativity doesn't excuse the harm, but we can acknowledge the ingenuity while still condemning the action. Think of it like this. The guy who figured out how to rob banks by tunneling under them was creative. Doesn't mean he shouldn't go to jail. Same principles apply here. We can appreciate the craft while still saying, yeah, that person deserved their ban. Alright, let's get into the Hall of Fame. Or maybe we should call it the Hall of Fame. These are some of the most creative, elaborate griefing tactics ever pulled off in MMO history. Let's start with one that actually got studied by epidemiologists. In 2005, World of Warcraft introduced a new raid boss called Hakkar. He had a debuff called Corrupted Blood that would damage players over time and spread to nearby players. It was designed to only work inside the raid. But someone figured out that if you dismissed your hunter pet while it had the debuff, then summoned it later outside the raid, the pet would still have corrupted blood. And it would spread to other players, and those players would spread it to more players. Within hours, major cities were plague zones. Players were dying as soon as they logged in. Low-level characters were getting one-shot by the disease. The capitals were littered with skeletons. People were panic fleeing to remote areas. Some players set up quarantine zones. Others deliberately spread the plague to as many people as possible. Now, the first person to do this might have been an accident, but the people who figured out the mechanic and then deliberately spread it to major cities, that was creative griefing at its finest. They eventually turned World of Warcraft into a zombie apocalypse simulator. Blizzard had to hard reset servers and patch the game to fix it. The CDC later studied the incidents because of how closely it mimicked real disease spread, including people deliberately trying to infect others. That's not just griefing, that's griefing that contributed to science. EVE Online is famous for its scams and heists, but this one stands out. A player named Callie created an in-game investment bank called EVE Intergalactic Bank. For months, he ran it legitimately. He paid out returns. He built trust. Players invested billions in ISK, which translates to thousands of real dollars. Then one day, Callie just took it all. Every single ISK in the bank. And he didn't just steal it. He bought a rare ship, put up a corporate message that basically said, "Thanks for the ISK, suckers," and then detailed exactly how he'd been planning this for over a year. But here's the creative part. He'd been documenting the whole thing. The planning, the social engineering, the moment-by-moment execution. He turned his heist into a story that got covered by mainstream gaming media. He became EVE famous, which is EVE Online is worth more than ISK. CCP, the developers, didn't ban him. In EVE, scamming is allowed as long as you don't break the EULA. Callie hadn't hacked anything or exploited bugs. He just used social engineering and patience. It was a corporate espionage as performance art. Years later, he came back and did it again with a different scheme. Because once you pull off something that creative, you've got a reputation to maintain. In Minecraft, there was a popular server with protected spawn areas where you couldn't place or break blocks. The protection was supposed to prevent griefing. One player, though, found a loophole. He spent weeks building a massive, ugly cobblestone monument right at the edge of the protected zone. It was so big that it blocked the view of everything behind it. It was deliberately hideous, just random cobblestone pillars and platforms with no aesthetic value whatsoever. But here's the genius part. Because he built it right at the edge of the protected zone and the structure extended into unprotected territory, the admins couldn't just delete it without manually removing thousands of blocks. And because he used basic cobblestone, there was no way to prove which blocks were his versus natural terrain. The server's admins tried to remove it, but players would repair it. It became a meme. People started calling it the monument. Eventually, the admins just gave up and built around it. This ugly cobblestone nightmare became a permanent fixture of the server, a testament to one player's dedication to architectural trolling. In Final Fantasy XIV, there was a healer in a high-level dungeon run who figured out they had ultimate power. About halfway through, they stopped healing, just stood there. When the party asked what was going on, the healer said, "Pay me 100,000 gil, or I just let you die." Now, in Final Fantasy, if you abandon a dungeon, you get a penalty and can't queue for 30 minutes. The party had already invested 20 minutes into this run. They needed the healer to finish. The healer knew this. Here's where it gets creative. The tank tried to kick the healer, but you need a majority vote, and the healer had queued with a friend who voted no. So they were stuck. They could either pay the ransom, abandon and take the penalty, or try to finish without healing. They tried to finish without healing, and they died. The healer laughed and stayed in the dungeon, preventing it from resetting. Eventually, 2 of the party members paid the ransom just to get it over with. The healer took the money, finished the run, and logged off. This player got banned when someone reported them with screenshots, but the tactic was brilliant in simplicity. They'd weaponized the game's anti-abandonment penalty and vote kick system. It's extortion, sure, but it's a creative extortion. In World of Warcraft, a player figured out an exploit with the auction house add-on system. They created thousands of single-item stacks of worthless material and listed them all at the same time. Anyone trying to use the auction house would have their game lag to the point of freezing because the add-ons were trying to process thousands of individual listings. The auction house became unusable. People couldn't buy, they couldn't sell, couldn't even open the interface without crashing. But the creative part, they did this on a Tuesday, right after the weekly reset when everyone was trying to buy raid materials. They single-handedly ruined raid night for half the server, and they did it with copper ore, the most basic material in the game. Blizzard had to hotfix the auction house and ban the player, but the damage was done. One person using game mechanics exactly as designed but in an unexpected way crashed an entire server's economy for a day. Back in EverQuest, which had some of the most brutal death penalties in MMO history, there was a tactic called train pulling. You'd aggro a bunch of high-level monsters, run into a populated area, and then either die or go invisible, causing all the monsters to attack everyone else. But one player took it to an artistic level. They mapped out the perfect train route from a dragon spawn point to the most populated newbie zone. They calculated the timing so the dragon would arrive right when the zone was most populated. They even announced it in general chat like it was a scheduled event. Dragon arriving at Freeport in 5 minutes. New players thought it was a cool server event. Veteran players knew what was coming and either fled or prepared to watch the carnage. The dragon showed up right on schedule and absolutely devastated the entire zone. Bodies everywhere, complete chaos. The griefer didn't just kill people, they created an event. They turned griefing into theater. People talked about it for years. That's creative griefing at its peak. So what are the actual techniques that creative griefers use? Let's break down the common patterns. First, there's physics exploitation. Games have collision detection, gravity, and other physics systems. Creative griefers find ways to weaponize these. Using player bodies to block doorways, using mounts to push people off cliffs, finding ways to clip through walls and get to areas that you're not supposed to reach. The game is following its rules, but the griefer is using those rules in unintended ways. Second, there's social engineering. This is using psychology and trust to manipulate people, setting up fake banks or guilds, pretending to help newbies, then betraying them, creating elaborate schemes that require weeks of building credibility. The game mechanics are fine, but the human nature is the exploit. Third, there's economic warfare. Manipulating markets, crashing auction houses, cornering resources, creating artificial scarcity. These players understand the game's economy better than the developers do, and they use that knowledge to cause chaos. It's griefing with spreadsheets. Fourth, there's systems abuse. This is finding ways to exploit the game systems like vote kick, reporting, or anti-cheat measures against their intended purpose. Like mass reporting someone to get them auto-banned or using vote kick to remove players right before loot drops. The systems are working as designed, but they're being used maliciously. Fifth, there's architectural griefing. In games with building mechanics, creative griefers create structures specifically designed to annoy. Blocking passages, creating lag with complex builds, making ugly monuments in visible areas. They're using creation tools for destruction. 6, there's the timing exploitation, understanding when servers are most vulnerable, when GMs are offline, when most of the players are offline. Timing your grief for maximum impact, it's about hitting when it hurts most. And finally, there's the long con. This is griefing that takes weeks or months to set up, joining guilds to eventually betray them, building trust to enable bigger scams. These are the griefers who are playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. What all of these techniques have in common is that they require understanding the game at the deeper level than most players. You can't just be good at the game. You have to understand the systems, the psychology, the economics, the timing. You have to think like a developer to find gaps they left. And honestly, that's kind of impressive even when it's being used for evil. These people are basically QA testers who went rogue. They're finding bugs and exploits not to report them, but to weaponize them. Alright, we need to talk about the elephant in the room. When does creative griefing stop being impressive and start being genuinely harmful? Let's go back to the funeral raid I mentioned at the start. Was it creative? Absolutely. It was well planned, well executed, and generated as one of the most talked about moments in WoW history. But was it okay? Hell no. These people attacked a memorial service for someone who actually died. They turned someone's real grief into content. They traumatized people who were already mourning. The fact that it was creative doesn't excuse that. If anything, it makes it worse because it shows they put thought and effort into causing that harm. There's a difference between griefing that annoys people and griefing that actually hurts people. Blocking a doorway in a game? That's annoying. Crashing someone's memorial service? Hurtful. Stealing someone's loot? Frustrating. Scamming someone out of money they spent months earning? Potentially devastating. The problem with creative griefing is that the creativity can make us lose sight of the impact. We get caught up in, wow, that's clever, and forget to ask, wait, who got hurt? It's like appreciating the technical skill of a con artist while ignoring the people they scammed. And some creative griefing crosses into real world harm. The Eve bank heist involved billions of ISK, which represents thousands of real dollars worth of time and effort. Some players lost everything. The corrupted blood incident made the game unplayable for days. The auction house exploits affected people's ability to prepare for raids, which could mean wasted subscription time. There's also the issue of intent. Some creative griefing happens by accident. Someone discovers an exploit and uses it without thinking about the consequences. But most of the stories we've talked about, those were deliberate. People knew they were causing harm and did it anyway because they thought the story would be worth it. Here's my take. You can appreciate the creativity while still condemning the action. The two aren't mutually exclusive. I can say that healer hostage situation was brilliantly designed, and also say that person deserved their ban and I hope they feel bad about it. Both things can be true. But we also need to be honest about the fact that celebrating creative griefing can encourage more of it. When we make legends out of these people, when we tell their stories with admiration in our voices, we're sending a message that this behavior gets you remembered. And some people will take that as encouragement. So how do developers respond to creative griefing? It's basically an arms race where players find exploits and developers patch them over and over forever. Every major creative griefing incident leads to patches. The corrupted blood plague led to better debuff containment. The auction house exploits led to listing limits. The healer hostage situation led to changes in how vote-kick works. Developers are constantly playing catch-up. But here's the thing, they can never fully prevent creative griefing because they can't predict every possible use of their systems. They're trying to build games with thousands of interacting mechanics, and that can't foresee every combination. Players have thousands of hours to experiment with systems the developers only spent months designing. Some developers embrace this. EVE Online basically said, scamming is a part of the game, deal with it. They've accepted that their players will find creative ways to grief, and as long as it doesn't break the EULA or involve real-world harm, it's allowed. This has pros and cons. Pro, it creates amazing emergent gameplay and stories. The con, it makes the game less accessible to new players who don't want to constantly watch their backs. Others developers take a hardline stance. Final Fantasy will ban players for any form of griefing, creative or not. They want their game to be welcoming and positive, so they aggressively police behavior. This also has pros and cons. Pro, the community tends to be friendlier. Con, it can feel overly sanitized and removes some emergent gameplay. Most games fall somewhere in the middle. They'll patch exploits when they find them, ban players who take things too far, but generally let minor griefing slide. It's a constant balance between player freedom and player protection. The really interesting thing is watching how developers learn from each other. When one game gets hit by a creative griefing tactic, other games often preemptively patch similar exploits. It's like a knowledge base of ways players will try to ruin everything. But honestly, developers will never win this arms race. As long as there are game systems, there will be players who find ways to exploit them. Creative griefing is basically a guarantee in any online game with enough complexity. The best developers can do is respond quickly and try to minimize the damage. Look, creative griefing is a weird thing to think about. On one hand, some of these tactics are genuinely impressive feats of game knowledge and planning. On the other hand, they often hurt real people and damage communities. If you're someone who enjoys creative griefing, I'm not going to tell you to stop. You're going to do what you want. But I will say this, think about the impact. Are you creating a funny story people will laugh about, or are you genuinely ruining someone's day? Is your creativity being used to entertain or to harm? Because there's a big difference. And if you've been a victim of creative griefing, remember that it's not your fault. You're not stupid for falling for a scam or not anticipating an exploit. These tactics work specifically because they're unexpected and clever. Don't beat yourself up for being outsmarted by someone who spent way too much time planning how to make you miserable. The line between impressive and harmful is thin, and where you draw it probably depends on whether you were the griefer or the victim. But we can all agree on this. Creativity is a powerful tool. Whether it's used to build amazing things or tear them down is up to the person wielding it. Next week on MMO Madness Behind the Troll Mask, we're diving into love and war, relationship drama that destroyed guilds. We're talking about in-game romance that turned toxic, breakups that fractured entire communities, and the messiest guild drama you've ever heard. Trust me, it's going to be really juicy. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and support the podcast. Tell your guildmates, share it on your Discord, leave us a review. And if you've pulled off a creative griefing or been a victim of it, email me at podcast@mmomadness.com. We want to hear your stories. And until then, stay creative, stay ethical, and remember, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I'm Boss Mode, and thanks for listening.